If I were to ask you, who's a prime example of power in Jujutsu Kaisen, you'd definitely answer Sukuna or Gojo. If we were to bar them from discussion, you might say Yuta or Toji. If you're an anime only, you'd point to Mahito or even Todo. Close manga readers would point out Yuji or mention Takaba and Kashima. And while I'd certainly respect all of these opinions, except for that last one, you're wrong by the way, there's one character in JJK that I believe stands out as being particularly underrated and under-discussed in terms of his strengths and what he means to the overall story of JJK. I am of course referring to ancient sorcerer and Culling Games player Ryu Ishigori. Ryu Ishigori is one of the ancient sorcerers given a second chance at life due to making a pact with Kenjaku, or that's Naruto Shikamo for you anime onlys. He participates in the Culling Games and gets into a three-way battle between himself, other ancient sorcerer Takaka Uro, and JJK's first protagonist, Yuta Okotsu. Ishigori's main gimmick within the JJK verse is that his technique is touted to be capable of producing the same amount of high power, regardless of Ishigori's current amount of cursed energy. This technique is called the Granite Blast, in which a giant beam of energy fires out of his head, acting as a literal headcanon. He is one of the three characters in the Triple Domain expansion, and while he loses the fight against Yuta, he is the last one to fall, and Yuta decides to spare his life as both him and Uro were more so killing Culling Game players to satisfy battlefield pride as compared to maliciously hunting them down for sport. Towards the end of the Culling Games arc, Ishigori is killed by Sukuna, thus marking his end, giving him a rather limited run in Jujutsu Kaisen. However, while his literal presence in JJK is limited, there are plenty of moments in his dedicated arc and outside of it that hint to broader implications that impact foundational ideas about Jujutsu Kaisen's power scaling. Particularly through analysis of the Sendai colony battle and what Sukuna himself says about Ishigori, we can find that he acts as a vital piece to understanding the power of Sukuna, both within the finale of JJK and even the Shibuya incident. This video is going to dissect those moments and go over their broader implications for the rest of the series. And if it wasn't clear, this video is going to contain heavy spoilers for Jujutsu Kaisen post-Shibuya incident, so here's your spoiler warning for that. Within the Sendai colony battle, Ryu fights Yuta Okotsu. He overpowers Yuta in hand-to-hand combat, and then Yuta calls out Rika to get more cursed energy and benefit from the hacks that come alongside her. Despite the fact that Ryu himself says that Rika is tougher than Yuta, he manages to scrap with her in hand-to-hand combat and knocks her away from the fight for a little bit. This pisses Rika off and causes her to awaken, the same way she does in JJK 0 when they were fighting Geto. To quickly contextualize his form within JJK 0, Geto states that when Rika does this, she exceeds her limits of her already overwhelming cursed energy. After the Triple Domain expansion and the retirement of Uro from the fight, Ryu and Rika have a direct beam clash where not only does Ryu win, but the narrator themselves states that the Granite Blast is stronger than Rika's blast. Editing Tough Man here. I'm saying that Ryu is combating Rika's blasts when in all actuality in this scene it's Yuta firing the blast, but since we know that Yuta is using Rika's cursed energy in this moment, given that she's manifested, it's pretty much the same thing as using Rika's power. Just wanted to make that note. Ryu then tanks a direct punch from Rika, and in response, he punches her back. This singular punch was capable of prematurely severing the connection between Rika and Yuta, despite the fact that Rika was already in her awakened state. This fight then ends with one last scrap between Ryu and Yuta, where Ryu gets overwhelmed by his own Granite Blast due to Yuta's copy hacks. Let's get something straight here. In terms of strength and durability, Ryu Ishigori clears both Rika and Yuta. His power bypasses Rika's durability outright, and in terms of hand-to-hand combat, he clears Yuta. He takes many attacks from the both of them, and the thing that did him in is his own power. This is incredibly important as Yuta is the poster boy of insane power within the JJK verse. His power is compared to Gojo's multiple times throughout the series, and he's even stated to have more cursed energy than Gojo. Within the recently adapted Execution arc, Yuta fights post-Shibuya Yuji, and while Yuji in both manga and anime does insinuate that he could beat Yuta in terms of hand-to-hand combat, his defeat is sealed once he gets grabbed by Rika, as Yuji himself states that she's just too strong for him to counter. This version of Rika would absolutely be weaker than the one that Ryu one-shot in the Sendai colony, meaning that there's a hefty argument for Ryu to be placed above post-Shibuya Yuji in terms of pure strength and durability. Let's be even more clear here. This means Ryu, just going on physical stats, of course with cursed energy enhancement, is stronger than the likes of Todo, Nanami, and probably even Mahito. And while unrelated, this comparison to Yuta would certainly place Ryu above JJK 0 Geto, meaning that if he were graded, he'd probably be a special grade threat. Ryu's first and only interaction with Sukuna happens with a version of Sukuna that is post-bath and post-possession of Megumi. This means that Sukuna here has near full control of his cursed energy output, as there's nothing impeding his power like there was when he first took Megumin's body. This is because he submerged himself within the evil bath ritual, which then granted him more control of his current vessel. At this point in the story, he still has only 15 of his fingers, meaning that while he's not at his absolute peak, he is still the version of himself that effortlessly wiped out Jogo and Maharaga in the Shibuya incident. Sukuna and Ishigori then square each other up, where Sukuna cleaves Ishigori with one slice across the chest. Impressed that he lives this, Sukuna tells Ryu that he meant to cut him into thirds, and that he'd have to fight him for real. Ryu sees the writing on the wall and charges a granite blast, where Sukuna then slices his head into pieces, killing him before it can go off, thus marking the end of the character. Now, why does this matter? As it seems like a rather pathetic send-off to not Josuke. Well, let's think about what this means in tandem with the Sendai colony battle. Ishigori in this fight with Yuta has a lot of feats of pure strength and durability. Strength-wise, he was capable of going toe-to-toe with Yuta, and was so powerful that he managed to sever the connection between Yuta and awakened Rika with a single punch. The Granite Blast itself was stated to be stronger than a full-power energy blast by awakened Rika. This, funnily enough, acts as a durability feat for Ryu, as he tanks not one, but 2 Granite Blasts turned upon himself. This means that these slashes by Sukuna right here are stronger than the power of the Granite Blast and Ryu Ishigori. This in turn would mean that these slashes far exceed the power of both Yuta and Rika by a wide margin, considering that they were not capable of defeating Ryu through pure stats. This would also mean that unless you think Ryu's punches are stronger than the Granite Blast, these slashes would more than likely eviscerate Rika, who's more durable than Yuta himself. Okay, so now that we have all these pieces, let's move on to the second mention of Ryu post-Sendai Colony, the Shinjuku Showdown. To fully understand this one, we have to give some context. The Shinjuku Showdown could also be called the Sukuna Jumping Arc, as after Gojo goes down, it's just every MFer left in the verse trying to keep Sukuna down. I say keep Sukuna down as something that ought to be noted is that Sukuna was incredibly weakened after the final Hollow Purple, meaning that although Gojo lost the fight, his sacrifice evened out the playing field for the rest of the cast as much as possible. This is clear in a good few moments throughout the final fight, and downright stated during Yuta's domain expansion around the halfway point of the arc. Sukuna says that his cursed energy levels are low because of Gojo and the combined effort of Yuta and Yuji. Along with that, his ability to use reverse curse technique is kaput. He says that his total cursed energy at the moment is about equal to Yuta's, which obviously is still a lot, but it's clear that it's way less than his baseline. Yuta states that although Sukuna is weakened, his energy is slowly returning to him, so Sukuna at this point in the fight, depending on how you view these slightly contradicting statements, is stronger than the version of himself that immediately beat Gojo. And one last agenda comment, this means that Kashimo lost to the weakest version of Sukuna. Cope in the comments. This is where Ryu comes in, as Sukuna, while fighting Yuji, Rika, and Yuta, is struggling to land a finishing blow on any of them. And upon thinking about what he needs to do to get out of the situation, he states it doesn't need to be harder than that, but unless it makes contact and cuts equal to that guy's attack, it'll never deliver a fatal wound. Where that guy he's referring to is Ryu Ishigori. This is Sukuna stating that at this point in the fight, his slashes cannot match the power of the Granite Blast, and thus he cannot hurt Yuta or Yuji. But why is this relevant? Well, if you remember earlier, I mentioned how Sukuna, post-bath, with only 15 fingers, killed Ryu Ishigori with his slashes. And then we have to remember that Ryu himself was capable of tanking multiple Granite Blasts. So Sukuna, with 15 fingers, was capable of creating slashes stronger than the Granite Blast. The fact that Sukuna, at this moment of the Shinjuku Showdown, was not capable of replicating the power of the GB means that he was neutered so much by the power of Gojo and the members of Jujutsu High that himself with 20 fingers at this point in time was weaker than himself with only 15 fingers. And this is by a substantial degree as well, considering that these slashes he was capable of emitting at this moment had to have been at least twice as strong as the Granite Blast when taking Ishigori's own durability into account. And if you doubt Sukuna's statement here, then may I point to the same scene where Sukuna states that his power is about the same as Yuta's, who we know couldn't match Ryu's output. We can even scale them both to Rika, where Ryu one-shot fully manifested Rika, and Sukuna just couldn't do that within Sukuna's domain. And to subscribe to the idea that 20-fingered Sukuna without any impediment is physically weaker than Ishigori is, ridiculous. Obviously, Sukuna not being able to tank out Rika could also be because he was distracted by Yuji and Yuta, so this point specifically is not one I'm completely married to, but I thought I would bring it up nonetheless. So what's the point of all this? Well, it's to highlight the idea that Ryu Ishigori gives us a greater understanding of Sukuna's varying levels of power and the power of the anti-Sukuna squad's plan. Through his fight with Yuta and very deliberate statements by both Sukuna and the narrator, we can see that Ryu acts as a good comparative point for Sukuna's power. And that's Sukuna at 3 different parts of the series, being his 15-fingered self in Shibuya, himself post-Megami possession, and his varying power levels in the Shinjuku Showdown. I haven't talked about Shibuya Sukuna very much, but the main point there is that if both of these versions of Sukuna have the same amount of fingers, then we can pretty safely assume that they're similar in terms of power. That is, of course, if you accept the idea that Megami and Yuji as vessels don't impact Sukuna's physical power, which they shouldn't by a substantial degree. This means that a lot of the scaling here would apply to these two bad boys in Shibuya, meaning that odds are the slashes Maharaga tanked are comparable to the ones Ishigori took. The main point is that Sukuna is cracked. He, and by proxy Maharaga, and depending on how funny you want to get, Jogo and Yozaru, cleared all of Shibuya to such a comical degree. Think about how effortlessly Sukuna cleared Ryu. Then think about how comparable Ryu was to Yuta and Rika. Then think about how Yuta, while barely using Rika, straight up killed a post-Shibuya Yuji. Now think about how Sukuna, who should be even stronger than the one that killed Ryu, was using him as a point of reference to the power he had to replicate, because Gojo and then Yuji and the others weakened him that much. And in case it needs to be said, I don't think Ryu is number 3 in the verse or anything, nor do I think there's like this huge long line of characters that in JJK that scale below him. Rather, I just wanted to highlight his huge impact on JJK's power scaling despite his small amount of time within the narrative. Thank you all so much for watching. The Dragon Ball Gods video will be out soon. I was just sitting on this quickie for a bit and I wanted to get it out, so have a great day.